So look, I've done a lot of terrible episodes over the years, and I've seen my fair share of terrible movies in all sorts of forms. But it's very rare to see a sequel to a terrible movie. But enter Planes 2, Planes, Fire and Rescue. As I understand it, it's the more popular one to the original. Some people even going on to say that this sequel is actually good. And I'd like to believe that. At the same time, looking at reviews from other people, you see the likes of 5.9s, 44s, and 2.2s. This movie seems to be a little bit of a 50-50. Is this yet again another terrible movie to add to the franchise's spin-off subtitle on Disneytoon Studios as opposed to mainline Disney Pixar? Or is this a terrible movie that has climbed out of the trenches themselves and actually made a damn good sequel? Well, let's go find out, as this is the sequel to the terrible Planes movie. Dedicated to real firefighters everywhere? Wow, is there some genuine heart in this movie? Honestly, I'm stunned we're reaching the wholesome immediately. Though at the same time, the orchestral music underneath kind of feels like we're about to fall into some propaganda. We already did that with the Paw Patrol movie. And the US military do sponsor a lot of movies. So yes, our guy is back. Dusty Crophopper, if you forgot his name. I low-key forgot his name earlier. And he's doing his normal life now that he rebuilt himself to be a better person than he was in his past life. He's a plane that's allowed to fly because he was willing to harvest his organs and replace them with racing parts. What a message from the first movie. And so now there's an early cup race going on, which of course Dusty fully wins, as the host goes on to fully exposite his entire past.
A small town crop duster who overcame impossible odds.
All the while we get more action scene montages of racing around this course, as Dusty himself goes on to show that he is a good person by shouting out that his crew are the best that anybody could ask for.
You're a gas consultant.
That's correct. I've got gas.
Yeah, this is Disneytoon Studio. I don't actually remember there being that many fart jokes in the first Planes movie. There were some, but good to know even in the sequel, the comedy is crap. But anyway, as we go to see out more of the world, there's this old guy who's an old fire truck who has to use rusties. Dusty has his own water tower now, that's cool. And symbolically, he flies over the farm that used to be his origins in the first movie. It's so lovely and symbolic. So glad he's not a schmuck who has to work hard labor like the working class. Not for him, he's middle class, he can afford new organs. But anyway, after some less humble origins, he goes out training with his old mentor man again, and then he stalls. And for the very first time, we see fully inside of a car plane in the car, planes, trains, bird planes universe. It turns out they don't have hearts behind their eyes. They do in fact have all of these little gears going on there. And something deep inside him has shredded. It's liver disease, the Planes movie. Woohoo! But yes, after some more mild puns that are pretty simple to come up with, like
I kicked Aston Martin.
Our little buddy here goes on to commit surgery to see what's wrong with the gears. And that in its own way is really interesting. Like, you know what I mean? I don't even need to start the sentence. There's surgery going right into the gear mechanics, and it gets more confusing as we get an answer.
Your reduction gearbox is failing.
Because it turns out here that their gearbox is like flaking off. There were metal flakes inside of their innards, right? So it's organ representation, sure, right? But then on top of that, they go to mention that his specific gearbox is out of production. It's not being made anymore. What? Where was it ever being made? Are there factories that produce cars? Why did they stop? Does this not kill everyone with that organ? Apparently it does. What is the factory system? Whatever the case, they can't build a new one. This is the plot line of Cars 3, in that our racing titular character is going to have to retire somehow. This movie, by the way, came out in 2014, so this is way ahead of its time for the threequel. I wonder if it too will have a well-achieved message over the whole thing, huh? Anyway, the point that Dusty needs to take away is that if he pushes himself into the red, he'll crash. And on that bombshell, we cut to... Okay, what the fuck? Immediately afterwards, yes, we've cut to a parody of Hooters. No, the song in that clip was not real, but there is suddenly this country vibe with a notable theme in the background if you pay enough attention. Nice one, sequel. Now we are to be exposed to pickup trucks saying pickup lines. It's lazy is what this kind of comedy is, but you know, it passes. Anyway, it's all about moping here. We'll start speeding things along until we get to the main plot line. The buddies here are discussing finding him a gearbox, asking out the whole world where they can find one. The old man from the origin of the first movie comes in, so that he'll offer him his old job. He naturally farts on the side, because that is 50% of his character, to which Dusty then flies out, moping into the night, dives himself into the red. What is he physically looking at in these shots? The dial is not on his nose. And then he goes on to crash. But it's a fire! And it's a challenge dealing with all the leaks in the water system since this place is so rural and old. And admittedly, it's a nice little sequence. You can see where the themes are going. You might remember the title of the movie. Another hurdle is the fact that the fire truck guy is so old that he's not the best. Until they eventually decide to take down the water tower. I like this. It was established earlier, it's symbolic as the destruction of Dusty's legacy and career, and it works. And as daybreak comes in and nobody slept over the night, I guess, the old man fire truck and his inability to keep up safety precautions around here caused the strip to be reported.
Is that guy writing down everything I say?
And on that note, the runway is shut down unless they find another fire rescue vehicle. The whole community is devastated as everyone needs this runway, and of course you can guess where this is going to go. So far for an introduction, I don't hate it, at least not that turning point. And actually, now that we've gotten over the more petty, unhumble beginnings of the first movie, we now start to get to some really good, interesting territory. We'll skip over the childish scene where they plan out how to upgrade the old man and nobody likes the idea. As the fire truck old man is now moping as Dusty comes to visit, blaming himself, of course, because he started the fire.
I'm old, Dusty. Looks like my firefighting days are over.
And it's voice lines like this that are surprisingly good. This is a real, striking at the heart kind of conversation. He's an old man fire truck who can't keep up with safety standards, and every achievement he's ever achieved on this wall are old and tattered at this point. It's a real good stark about legacy and success. The voice acting in this movie are surprisingly too good for what it deserves. Having a genuine, serious, wholesome, but sad conversation in the middle of your kids' movie, I guess I'm just all for them. And they're kind of rare in terrible movies, of the past 60 I've seen anyway. But anyway, as the plot continues, we come to see an old picture of him and a crop duster plane, just like Dusty, who is a seat, a single-engine air tanker. An aerial firefighter. You know where this is going. Dusty is now going to be the second fire rescue vehicle. He's going to drop away the career of racing. He's going to solve the runway strip, and he's going to become a water plane. Technically, it's more harvesting of organs to become someone else you're not, but yeah, it's more wholesome this way. And so off he flies away to get certified. With, admittedly, some pop culture music, but it's not horrid. I don't recognize the song, so that's a start. Skimming the details, he arrives, sees a bunch of titular characters that are gonna be the future team members, and then there's a fire out to go to. The land for where he can get the certificate is indeed at a fire watch canyon, where forest fires are very common. Everyone gushes about him for being the celebrity champion racer plane, and then they're off to action, with an actual pop culture moment this time.
Drop the needle!
Yes, this time they're out to play AC/DC's Thunderstruck. And honestly, this feels really strange. You got all of these beautiful droning, craning shots of planes and fire and water, and it really does feel kind of like glorified propaganda. But also, how else do you display this big feat of heroicism and action, you know? This is a military movement in a sense. But what I really enjoy through this initial exposure of fire team rescue is the fact that we genuinely learn all sorts of processes of actual firefighting. Up to this point, the entire Cars franchise has just kind of been racing stories, or weird spy ones, where humans just happen to be actually the cars, not just the drivers. They're very flat, self-accommodating, independent stories of maybe the determination of the human spirit, but they're cars. But it's nothing really wholesome and goal-minded. It's sport. It's only sport. But this looks like the kind of movie that could genuinely inspire a kid to become part of a fire rescue team. And we're seeing all of the miniature mechanics of how that team works. We learn about where the water is stored, how they come to gather it, the movements that are needed to sometimes handle a fire, and what are the pros and cons for certain maneuvers. we learn that they're boxing it in, that there's another team that shreds the trees down below. This seriously plays out like a really strange montage advert. But I guess the little 6-year-old boy version of me inside my brain just wants to lap it all up. This is just really cool. Maybe I'm falling for propaganda, but at least this is saving lives, you know? Theoretically. Or maybe I should just praise it on the fact that thank God they didn't imply that the dropping of water was one big pissing thing. They could have done that in Plane's universe. That would certainly change the entire vibes of the movie, if everyone was just pissing on fire. I'm so glad the water is clear. Oh, also they hook a cow along the way. That seems a little extreme. Anyway, following that, we finally get to meet the man that's gonna be able to certify Dusty. It's Blade here, who is very dry and even calls out Dusty for being in the airspace. I'm glad there's someone serious and legitimate here. But Dusty is taken on and they start to rearrange his organs. They cut off his feet and give him new ones. And they have wheels, apparently. We're genuinely learning pieces of engineering here. I wish the Cars franchise did that more. I want to know how a car functions. Even if it's a weird anatomy question, in this case, it's just fully they are the vehicles. Let's learn some mechanical engineering along the way. It's at this point as well we come to a nice thematic piece, which is another wall of portraits. There were all sorts of members of the fire team that are glorified and immortalized on this wall, but what do you have to do to get there? You crash. And then they give us one final piece of, technically I still have the propaganda thing in mind.
Takes a special kind of plane.
But also, I kind of see what they're saying. These are fighters for life and death. It's such a more noble career choice to make a story out of. And then the montage training begins. This very much just feels like it's sticking to the formula of the first movie, whereby there is a new mentor, they come with information. Here's how you catch the water. Don't fly low at night, that's where you crash. You gotta make sure you don't miss your accuracy. You've gotta push into the red at certain moments, which of course is gonna clash against Dusty's entire thing. All the while, also in the montage, we see that he's being stalked at night by this girl here who is going to be the romantic interest by the end of the movie. It's kinda dated. She's very parasocial. You can see the formula emerging with this exact same timing for a training montage, but it works. What else is he going to do next? But it does all go by very, very fast. And then to break it all up, we get a phone call from back at home. Let's hear what the buddies have to say. They got to get their voice actors some paycheck.
Listen to my new siren!
This was the guy I was complimenting the work of 5 minutes ago. They're tarnishing his legacy in the same breath. But following the next day, the park superintendent visits. And you know, he's the bad guy because, he's a car in this Planes movie. He is the big dog of this entire lodge and canyon and wants to have a grand reopening party for his big wooden log out in this canyon with VIPs coming along. All the while being stunned that Crop Hopper is actually here and wants to, of course, bring him for that celebrity status.
I smell photo op, flash cha-ching.
But while I have all these compliments about the delivery of everything, and, you know, the plot's okay, it's standard, the jokes are really dragging this movie down. There is not a single good one in this movie. I'm just gonna spoil it now. Anyway, we hear about some admin, like 80% of the budget went to his lodge and not the rest of the fire prevention procedures. Blade complains about there being too many people and low humidity in the atmosphere, though this doesn't come back, but it's an interesting detail to pick up, I guess. And that he used to go by the name of Blazin' Blade. So let's go find out what that's all about, eh? It's time for some character plotline. Yes, this is the only new thing there could be. It's not that new.
Yeah, they're real.
Oh my god. Where we come to learn, in another sort of formulaic way, our old mentor here was in fact famous once on a TV show called Chops, which is a very nice parody of, obviously, Cops. He used to pretend to be a firefighting helicopter with a second guy here called Nick Lupin Lopez. Played by Paul Rudd Irwin? Nice, okay. But nobody knows why he's here now. Ooh. Is it because his buddy's dead? Wow, what a surprise. We'll come back to that later, of course. As it's the next day, there's another fire, and this one is a big one. It's just common in grounds like this. You only hear about the big ones anyway, which is something I guess makes sense. Never thought of that before. I'm in Britain. We barely have sunshine, let alone trees to catch fire. This time, it's another great fire-stopping experience. A little less glorified this time. We don't exactly have Thunderstruck playing in the background. It's more so focused on Dusty as the new trainee member actually trying to do the task and pretty much failing most of the way. He aims too high with the water. He's nervous once his picture is taken for the wall. And even the little ones end up getting trapped by the fire briefly before Dusty does come in clutch and sprays them down so they can clear the way and move the on-fire tree. The fire is contained, it's boxed in, and the jumpers will handle the rest, which, as well, super interesting to learn. Just the fact that sometimes fires are only contained and they have to deal with it slowly for the rest of the night on a smaller scale. We do also learn as well that these planes really shouldn't be out 30 minutes after sunset, because that's the most likely time to crash when you have low visibility. Makes so much sense. Doesn't mean that it's been without drama, as Dusty has been flubbing along the way and daring himself to push himself to do the right thing, thereby breaking formation instead of taking the safest route approach. So Blade only has complaints for him for going out of formation in a life or death situation. Oh, and I only noticed this the second time through. This
Whoa! That was low.
This is foreshadowing. Technically, it only appears once. Really, I think this probably should have appeared twice to properly establish a beat coming later, but oh well. But before we go on, I just wanted to say a quick thank you for watching this far in so far. You're at the halfway mark. If you are new to this channel, then do consider subscribing to see any future terrible movies we cover. Or check out the prequel to this movie if you want to lower your expectations. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this movie on the side, so do please let me know in the YouTube comments below or on our Discord server if you want to be more involved with our community. And I shall let you get back to the second half of the sequel to the terrible Planes movie. Cheers! Anyway, we now get to see the Superintendent's giant lodge, and they do weddings here. We come to meet up another serious fire rescue ranger in the form of Pulaski? As Pulaski?
Engine Pulaski, sir.
Pulaski?
Pulaski.
Right, anyway,
Well, whatever his name is, it's Patrick Warburton. What a surprise. There's also another guy, Ranger Jammer, who knows about the wildlife populations. They're two good guys inside of this superintendent bubble. There's another pun gag about a guy called Boat Reynolds. And then our main characters come to have a chat with this old RV couple.
We wore off the treads on our honeymoon.
I'm not just stunned by the quality of these jokes, I'm stunned that it is exclusively fart jokes and sex jokes. There is no other joke in this movie. In fact, nobody else makes a joke. This is not a jokey movie, it's really serious. Unless it's an opportunity to talk about groin functionalities. Oh, okay, I guess there are other jokes sometimes, like the giant helicopter wind lifter here then goes on a monologue in the middle of this conversation.
He burned his tires. He thought they were his favorite snack.
I mean, it's a story beat, I guess. And then we cut back to the Dusty plotline at the radio with his old buddies again, where he has a final heartbreak, learning that while they did find his gearbox at one point, it was the wrong one. The crate was supposedly mislabeled.
Nobody has your gearbox.
It is the sad ending that retirement is mandatory, and he's never gonna function again. His liver is damaged or whatever. He cannot be a racer, and I love that. Of course I do. British endings, we love our dark endings, but to be able to find purpose in another career despite limitations is brilliant. And to take on a far more noble one has so much more emotive weight to it, especially to present into a kids movie. This is just a brilliant, tragic, heroic story. But now we have our final hurdle. As it turns out, overnight, one of the VIP jets blew embers in all directions accidentally by flying too low over the boxed-in fire. None of the VIPs or the superintendent care about the environment here. And now there are two new fires. It's the real thing beginning, and we have a whole giant lodge of civilians to handle as well.
Fire is about 4 hours from their front door. They're gonna have to evacuate.
All the while at this pivotal moment in the story when the real drama is actually amping up, Dusty is distracted for his own personal problems with his liver. We're gonna stick that it's his liver. He's not paying attention to instructions. He's not split loading the water, he's full loading the water. He drops it all at once rather than one leg at a time, separate to make it last longer. Adding on to that, he goes against orders and tries to restock more water in the lake rather than going back to base. He struggles to catch the water. He's stalling in the water. His liver's giving him issues. It's a proper disaster everywhere. A brilliant culmination of conflicts from personal to actual outside world scale. And it drags Blade back to his olden ways, having to use a little hoister to catch him in the river like he did in the TV shows. The hoist gets caught in all of the trees, the both of them are stuck. The only chance he has is to restart his engine and push it far into the red line to get out there in time. Or else he's gonna fall into the waterfall and it all goes downhill from here. How does it turn out? Alright, It's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but we'll allow it. But against these literal life or death situations, which we practically haven't seen in the whole Cars universe, we come to the main points and themes of the stakes here. You can't outrun a fire. That's a great factoid I've never thought of before. Again, my 6-year-old brain is slowly growing. Great to teach on the side of a kids movie.
This isn't about you. This is about life and death.
It's the reality shock that Dusty needs. He doesn't have what it takes, and he's not a noble person. He's a racer, all for himself and none for anybody else. To which he retorts,
My gearbox is busted! Alright?
it's the culmination of all of his failures as a person. He doesn't know his purpose right now, and he's just flubbing it, as anyone would with our individualist perspective. To which Blade responds with a brilliant thematic line that shows some genuine great writing intermixed in this noble story that I think can really resonate well in this emotive scene.
If you give up today, think of all the lives you won't save tomorrow.
It's one of the few times that a movie isn't just about achieving a goal or individual success. It's about other people. It's about sacrificing civilian. Sacrificing yourself for civilians. It's a career into safety, and it's not something you can flub like racing.
So what are you going to do?
And so they go into the mines. They're going to wait for it to burn over. It's the only chance they've got. And more so than that, Blade here, the veteran mentor of this safety team, is taking the brunt of the fire, protecting Dusty as his final civilian to protect. And there's some great cinematography, like the fire flakes coming over the dark screen. It's really good. Naturally, let's cut this up with the superintendent talking a little bit, shall we? He's trying to give a speech and ignoring any fire issues, of course.
And you're old and you have a dumb hat on.
But now that he's delayed enough and refused to evacuate all of his people until this very point, finally, all the civilians see the fire in the horizon. Now, everybody evacuates. Planes going up one at a time, which is really interesting. Obviously, this is also a fictional world. Everyone is a car and a plane, so they would have had to have worked out their own safety fire proceedings to leave, but it's one plane at a time. Only 5 miles an hour. It's walk slow but consistent. It's interesting. Or maybe I'm just getting old, man. They even give out advice that I assume they would give out to pilots, or did they just invent it?
Remember to avoid the smoke and stay above the canyon walls.
On top of that, there's a train that takes out people in certain batches until it's full and they have to wait, and others have to take the main exit road. I've thankfully never been in a fire situation, but the organization as well is an interesting thing to see actually represented, even in this fictional world where they've got to work out their own routing plans to make things efficient and safe. Maybe it's just the goody two-shoes in me that's interested in safety organization. Anyway, back to Dusty and Blade. They finally get out of the mines. They are alive, but Blade... Blade is too damaged to fly now. He's returned back to base. The others are trying to repair him. He's resting. And now we finally get to learn of what happened to Nick Lupin Lopez. I mean, it's kind of what you expect, but well. As it turns out, Nick was doing a loop-de-loop for a stunt as he usually does on a routine day, but there was a freak crosswind. But the tragic part of the story is Blade was the first one on the scene, but he didn't know what to do. He wasn't a real lifesaver. And so instead of choosing to pretend to be a hero, he showed up here, he got trained and certified, and came here, saving them for real. It's a little standard and formulaic, but it is a real attempt at an emotive driving theme. It can resonate with children. Somehow it resonates with my reptilian brain. And even if it's been done again and again, it's a great formula to play with. It's wholesome and emotive. It's not original, but it's slightly burgeoning towards a territory of making you cry. Even if it doesn't succeed, this is miles beyond practically all the other terribles we've covered this far. Maybe my perspective is just warped from how many terrible movies I've seen, but I love this. And more so than that, the superintendent now has gone to reallocate the water onto his lodge to get all the sprinklers going, taking away from the firefighters themselves. A little bit on the nose to make it seem like he's the bad guy, but yeah, sure. And adding on to all of that, the evacuation goes naff on the back end. The main road is blocked off. Pulaski's sprinkler is knocked off of his persons. A fire blocks the main road and the train exit. And it's after sunset. Visibility is low and we're at the highest risk of a crash. Windlifter is in charge now, and Dusty is allowed back up again. I mean, he's never been rejected airspace so far, but they keep almost running it into a story beat. And now there's more stakes. There's no water pressure. They can't receive new water. There is no lake. It's all dried up.
All we have left is what's in our tanks. Let's make it count.
And adding on to that, the whole canyon is on fire now. This is not photorealistic Pixar, but it's still pretty stunning visually. To have actually the world on fire and this disadvantaged team with limited water supply is just a great hurdle to overcome as a conflict. The music even cutting out as they fly through the fire is some nice, pretty simple cinematic techniques there. They come to throw out their sprays of water on the blockage, only 3 sprays and that's all they've got. The little ones come in to clear the road, and the main exit is actually saved. But it's not the end of our plot line, as those 2 old RVs that we spoke to earlier are at the climax of the issue. They mentioned before at the conversation we essentially skipped over, other than the honeymoon line, that they have a specific place in the canyon where their first kiss took place. And we've established where that is, on the far other side of the park, specifically at a training spot that Dusty was struggling with in the montage for not pushing into the red for it. Dusty goes on to say to Windlifter that he has the plan, he's the fastest, and he'll scoop out from the lake over there that's not dried up. And so he's allowed.
Go. And be safe.
And so here it is. He bumps along the river, collecting whatever he can. The bridge is breaking and the RVs are panicked. Dusty then also flies through all of this cliff debris like there's nothing there, which is a crazy shot to put in the middle of this movie and not really talk about. And then as everything's building up, we then have the surprise in the form of Blade rocking up as another Deus Ex Machina, but we'll allow it. It's his final moment, sure. He's able to fly and hoists them into position to keep them still on the bridge. And then Dusty goes on to scoop water from the waterfall as he flies upwards vertically. I think this is bloody brilliant. I don't know if that's actually a procedure that's possible. I don't know if it's a thing that's at all standard. Probably not. But of all the ideas you could come up with a admittedly kind of limited pick up water, spray it later, I am stunned to find something like this in this movie and actually really like it. A brilliant final execution, and it just, I don't know, it's cool, man. Let my 6-year-old me have fun. But then it also becomes that final last-minute decision for Dusty, pushing into the red line anyway. He knows that's how to successfully do this maneuver. He's always hesitated for the sake of his liver, as he will crash if he does it. But in coming away from an individualist running for a championship trophy for an individualist sport, now he's here to make the move to save real lives. And so, of course, he makes that leap. The music has cut out, he's seemingly stood up top, he's finally making the final play, and then he quick sprays the bridge. The RVs use the chance to race off of this crumbling wooden structure. Smoke begins to billow out of his nose in a way we've never really seen in the Cars franchise before. All the alarms are going off, and then he stalls. And that right there would have been an incredible, symbolic, tragic British story for the terrible plane sequel. But of course, it's always okay to get a happy ending on the side too, so let's see that. The canyon is all cleared, the fire has subsided, we montage through a cross dissolves as time passes, and Dusty is repaired after being airlifted to base. Finally reawakening 5 days later, with the semi-romantic interest dipper by his side the whole time.
I like watching you sleep.
Again, this is the most dated part of the movie. No, it's not going to be addressed by the movie. The superintendent was fired, with Jammer being put in charge for actually handling the organization correctly. And finally, Maru, the repair guy, has some news. They've replaced his props, replaced his damaged wing ribs, his pontoons are back on, and his gearbox
It's your fix!
Wait, really?
A custom-made epicyclic concentric reduction gearbox.
Yeah, okay, see, I have all of these praises for all of the deliveries and the plot direction, as formulaic as it has been. I'm even happy with a happy ending that he's not dead at the end. But this ending kinda disappoints me. While it has been established multiple times that Maru builds things himself, now it's better than new, the very fact that he fixed the main liver problem, I think I don't like. Because on the one hand, okay, it makes sense that he could be even better of a firefighter now. He doesn't have that disability of not being able to redline it. That's great. If that was the final ending choice of the movie, it's not. The expected caveat of this improvement is the fact that that original strip that was taken down because of basically OSHA violations is reopened for operations. That's lovely. The friends can give out their corn and all this good stuff. And Dusty is here to be the second firefighting aerial vehicle. Except he doesn't actually stick to that second shift. Well, he does, but he juggles it as a side hustle. He doesn't actually quit racing.
As long as the boss here will give me the day off.
Anytime.
He does them both part-time, and that is too far off of the happiness end for me. I love the idea that symbolically he can't do his original racing, and so he finds a different career and a noble one along the way. Or even, he does get his gearbox back, but he chooses to stick to the noble career instead. Having him do both, in a way, takes away some of the nobility. After just learning about doing the sacrifice play to saving real lives, he chooses to go back to the individualist sport success as much as he can. And that is a real major dip on the plotline message of this movie. They go on to praise him, saying it takes a special kind of plane to do what you do, but for him to revert back to the start of the movie, I don't know, kinda grinds my gears in a way that rips off little metal shavings. Also now suddenly, the Peak Air Attack team are doing an aerial presentation, which I'll be honest, feels a little bit out of left field and out of character. They are very much serious characters. I can't see them doing something this unserious. Who's looking after the entire canyon right now? It's still summer, it's still fire season. But yeah, Dusty is part of it. He pushes into the red line. He doesn't die. He opens his wings, he flies directly up, and he pisses on the audience. And at the very last second, after I was enthralled by so much of this wholesome semi-propaganda, something just kinda gets lost in the message right at the end. But also, I have a real 50-50 with this movie, I think. This is not even nearly a terrible, terrible movie. I've seen a lot of trash, and looking at the reviews, they're not happy. It's mostly pretty rotten. 44, 56, 5.9, 2.2. God, Letterboxd scares me. But I think I get it. The plotline wasn't crazy, it was pretty formulaic and simple. And there was a lot of expository explaining, but I loved that because it was such a cool concept in that it wasn't just telling us story beats, it was reflective of real maneuvers and operations. Perhaps this is some of the best concept for the Cars universe, full franchise included. It doesn't make one cry, but it almost kind of begins to lean that way with some stellar voice acting and great writing in some scenes. But of course, it's also awfully predictable, and the messaging at the end missed the perfect mark. There's also very little humor in this movie, unless it's fart and sex jokes, which really drag this movie down. But having a movie that's otherwise really serious, I actually kind of like in a way. Maybe it's just that I'm so used to absolute garbage that I do like this movie, but I think this is absolutely fine for a movie. It excites me and my inner child. Even if it's pretty to the numbers and low-key all just marketing, it almost works. I kind of want to work in the Firewatch industry after this. And in a sense, if it leads to a career of someone choosing to save other people's lives, is that really such a bad thing? I guess on my end, something to consider for retirement, if I ever choose to retire into rural America. We finish off with another kind of propaganda-feeling montage for the credits with just, glorified music and shots. Executive producer John Lasseter... Okay, get that off my screen. And there is a post-credit scene of Cad the superintendent now working at the Death Valley National Park. Ha! He has to be hot. Alright then. There's a reason I titled this video as not the terrible plain sequel, but the sequel to the terrible Planes movie, is because maybe at the end of the day, this is the perfect case scenario of a terrible movie clawing its way up and finally finding its place in the sequel. A real stunner amongst the gutters of the Cars spin-off franchise. It's not exactly a diamond, but damn does it somehow have a lot of heart in the middle. But on that note, I'm gonna end it off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for making it to the end of this lengthy video. Do let us know your thoughts and analyses of Planes, Fire and Rescue. Send them in the YouTube comments or on our Discord server. And for now, I shall see you in a little bit.